Welcome to the Underground Bible Study. I'm Steve Ashworth, your host, and I've been teaching the Bible for over 30 years, and I've discovered solutions that can help you reach your full potential in Christ. Now, this channel is aimed toward two groups of people. First of all, it's aimed toward people who call themselves Christians. Welcome. Secondly, it is aimed toward those who are not Christians, but are curious. In fact, maybe nobody knows that you're curious other than you and God. Maybe no one has explained Christianity to you, and it's very confusing and frustrating to you. I want you to know that you are welcome here. Now, the title of this episode is one that people use either for why they don't go to church or why they stop going to church. They'll say, all Christians are hypocrites. Maybe you've heard that. Why do they think that? Well, we're going to talk about the solution to this, and it has everything to do with your spiritual maturity. I heard the story not long ago. My wife and I were talking with a member of our small group at the time. She is remarried, having gone through a divorce a few years ago. My wife and I knew her and her first husband through the Christian school that our daughters attended. Her husband was a Christian. He used to cook hamburgers on the grill at Friday night football games. In fact, it dawned on us that I had been considered for a position in the church that they attended years ago. Her husband was on the committee that was considering me. No, I didn't get the job, but as far as anyone could see, he was the model of a faithful Christian. Well, a few years ago, he told his wife that he was in love with another woman, and he wanted to see where it went. He didn't love his wife anymore. He divorced her, married the woman he was in love with, and changed to her particular religion. His wife was blindsided. Their college-age children were floored. They had difficulties in their marriage, but she didn't see that coming. When he left, she was lost. Eventually, the Lord led her to a new job where she met her new husband, who also went through a divorce and loves the Lord. She sees her second marriage as her second chance, and she thanks God with tears for her second husband. We hear different versions of the same story far too often. It seems to me that there are only two conclusions to draw about this man's faith. Either Christianity doesn't work, or this man had a surface faith that didn't touch his actual decisions. I lean toward the second option. The fulfilling Christian life is not going through some religious rituals or checking off the boxes on some church list. It begins with a real faith in God that affects what I actually do on a day-to-day basis. Jesus said in John chapter 6, verse 38, "For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me." Have I come to do my will or God's will? We'll explore this later because it is one of the keys to the fulfilling Christian life. But let's start here. Is your faith one that looks good to others but doesn't affect your life? Or is it the desire of your heart to do God's will? Spiritual growth was always a nebulous concept for me. You know you're supposed to do it, but you don't really know what it looks like. I grew up believing that a faithful Christian was someone who was at church every time the doors were open. Now, it is good to know that the church can depend on you to be there, but that actually has nothing to do with spiritual maturity. As the cheesy old saying goes, going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than going to a garage makes you a car. Someone said it another way. Going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than going to McDonald's makes you a Big Mac. Although, if you eat enough Big Macs, you may start looking like one. But I digress. It is important for us to have a clear picture of what it means to grow spiritually. In my quest to define spiritual maturity, I've read and studied numerous sources, including John Ortberg's Monvi Project and Jim Putman's real-life discipleship model, which has had a huge impact on my thinking. But there's also a fascinating study done by the Willow Creek Association, and it is called the Reveal Study. Willow Creek and churches like it have been excellent through the years at reaching people who are far from God. The assumption Willow Creek made was that the more a person participated in church activities, the more likely those activities produced a person who loves God and others. The research found, however, that there is no correlation between the two. Russ Rainey, who summarized the findings, said this, quote, "The study divided church attendees into groups according to their level of spiritual formation. Those who are exploring Christianity, those who are growing in Christ, those who are close to Christ, and those who are Christ-centered. Those in the first two groups expressed satisfaction with their experience. Those in the last two groups did not. Willow Creek and its surrogates found that the more mature a person was in Christ, the less satisfied they were." And the study concluded, quote, "Our analysis paints the picture of the church being too preoccupied with the early growing years, leaving the spiritual adolescents to find their own way without preparing them for the journey," unquote. Now, that fascinates me. I don't think Willow Creek is alone in their experience. You may have dropped out or been tempted to do so for that very same reason. The church was great at bringing people in and holding their hand as they got started on their spiritual journey, but they were not so great at growing people up and sending people out. In fact, the more a person got past the hand-holding stage, the more they felt that they were left on their own to find their own way. And how many Christians can repeat that story? Not only that, but many of those same people were thinking about leaving the church due to their dissatisfaction. But what I wanted to know is this: does it have to be either or? Why can't it be both and? Shouldn't a church be good at bringing people in, building people up, and sending people out? Think of all three of those areas. Evangelism is bringing people in. We need to focus on people who are far from God in the hopes that they will come to Christ for salvation. And once they become a disciple of Jesus, an imitator of Jesus, a learner from Jesus, we begin the process of building them up, getting them as strong and healthy in the Lord as possible. Then we send them out to use the gifts God has given them to make an eternal difference with their one and only life. They embrace the mission of Christ as their own. They say, as Isaiah did in Isaiah 6 and verse 8, "Here am I, Lord, send me." That is maturity. The church has to intentionally be good at all three. It is not either evangelism or maturity that we need. It's both evangelism and maturity that we're looking for. And the 5 Ds are the key to making that happen. And we'll unpack that in future episodes. Everything in spiritual growth is about the end game. What do we want to become? Where do we want to get to? What we want to become, obviously, is more like Christ. Becoming like Christ means embracing the mission of Christ. For example, the entire book of 1 Corinthians in the New Testament was written to a group of Christians who had come to Christ, but who had gotten a few steps past the baptistry and decided to set up camp. After teaching through the book a few years ago, I became convinced that the reason that there are so many controversial subjects that come up in 1 Corinthians is that there were so many immature Christians at Corinth. When you are immature in Christ, you haven't yet trained yourself to distinguish good from evil. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 1, Paul says this, "Brothers, I could not address you as spiritual, but as worldly, mere infants in Christ. I gave you milk, not solid food, for you were not yet ready for it. Indeed, you are still not ready. You are still worldly, for since there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not worldly? Are you not acting like mere men?" In other words, Paul says, there is supposed to be a difference between a person who has come to Christ and a person who is not. You can always tell if a Christian is spiritually immature if there has been no change in their life. Maybe they made a New Year's resolution to go to church or get more spiritual, but their life looks the same as if they had never met the Lord. The end game is not simply becoming a Christian, but in embracing the mission of Christ as my own. Your baptism into Christ is not the finish line. It is the starting line. Where will you be when you get where you're going? For many people, this seems like the impossible dream. How can I get from where I am right now to where God dreams for me to be? You and I don't want to be hypocrites. We want to be the real deal. I'm here to tell you that the fulfilling Christian life is available to you right now. God is always going to do his part because he is faithful. Now, it is up to you to do yours. Take the first step. If you stick around, we'll go there together. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.